10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 233. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 233. Hope you are all doing well out there. This episode is going to be more of a little chat, almost kind of like a masterclass. We're going to talk about the topic we've been talking about for the entire month, but we're going to look at it from a different angle. I realized that through the past 3 episodes, we never really discussed why we're doing this, why we're learning these tunes in multiple keys. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you some solid reasons and give you a nice resource for the Patreon members that's going to give you some information that maybe you haven't come across before. But before we jump into the episode, I just wanted to mention Patreon. We are a listener-supported podcast, and we use the platform Patreon, which is fantastic. It allows the listeners of the show to directly support us and keep the episodes coming at you, high quality each and every week. We've got 2 tiers over there. You can either choose to support us for $3 a month and get a PDF for every single episode, or you can support us at $5 a month and get the PDF and the audio examples pulled out of the episode and listed separately so you can practice with them, play along with them. I'm also including a lot of backing tracks over there. So if you'd like to sign up, you can go over to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up for one of those tiers, and you'll get instant access to all the materials for every single episode we've ever put out. I've got some brand new patrons that I want to thank a lot. Thank you to our new $3 patrons, Colin and Joseph. And thank you to our new $5 patrons, Pierre, Mark, Jason, and Anthony. Thank you guys so much for signing up. And of course, as always, thank you to everybody that's supporting us for a long time over there. Really appreciate it. Keeps the podcast going. And remember, you can get signed up if you're not signed up already by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, and pledging your support today. All right, so let's jump into the episode. So I want to go over the reasons behind presenting these past 3 episodes to you. So we've been talking about taking melodies and putting them into multiple keys. Doesn't necessarily have to be all 12 keys, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But I do feel like it's a very, very valuable part of our practice routine to put these tunes and melodies into more than their original key. So let's start with the first reason. The first reason in my mind that this is very valuable is it forces you to learn the tune on a deeper level. So what I mean by that is, let's say you took all the things you are and you learned it in 5 different keys. It's not that you are ever going to play the tune in any other key but the original, but what you're doing by learning it in multiple keys is you are in effect gaining a much, much deeper understanding of the way that that tune works. So yeah, maybe you won't remember it in 5 keys for the rest of your life, but you can be pretty darn sure that you are going to remember it for your whole life in the original key. Because to tell you the truth, the original key is going to seem super easy to you after you learn it in those other 4 keys. So on a practical level, this is so important, because how many times have you learned a tune and you just kind of learn it surface level and then you forget about it pretty quickly after you learn it? And that is one of the most frustrating things when it comes to practicing jazz, is spending time on something and then that time kind of goes out the window because you end up forgetting what you worked on anyway. So even just learning a tune in one other key is really going to solidify your understanding of that melody and that set of chord changes. So there's advantage number 1. That's the first reason why every tune that you learn, why not learn it in 2 keys? I know it seems like a lot of work, but it'll get easier the more that you do this. So learn it in at least one other key, and it will increase your understanding of the structure of that tune. All right, reason number 2. There are many situations where you will end up playing tunes not in their traditional keys. Okay, so whether you are playing in a big band and you're playing a jazz standard, but the arranger has chosen to put it in a different key because it will fit better on everybody's instruments. Now, let's say you have to take a solo over that tune, and it's over the traditional chord changes of the tune, but it's in a different key. Your life is going to be a lot easier if you've already thought about this set of chord changes in a different key. Or you may not even have to have thought about that particular tune in a different key, but if your brain is functioning on the level where you're thinking in multiple keys like every day in the practice room, that's not going to phase you whatsoever to all of a sudden take that set of chord changes and play them in a different key. That has happened to me hundreds of times in my career. Let's say I'm playing a big band arrangement of Take the A Train. That is a chord progression that I know so well. And before I started putting tunes and chord progressions in different keys, if I saw that in a big band arrangement in a different key, it would really throw me for a loop. It's kind of that thing where like you're playing something that's very, very familiar, but somebody has kind of flipped it on its head. So it's familiar and super foreign to you at the same time. And that used to really, really mess with me because I would understand the sound of the actual progression, but the key that it was in would really throw me for a loop. So a situation like that. Another situation that you may find yourself in pretty often, depending on what kind of gigs you play and what kind of circle you run with, is playing with a vocalist. They do tunes in keys that are advantageous to the range of their voice. So almost always when I'm playing with a vocalist, we do standard tunes, but in a completely different key. And the advantage here is that very, very rarely do I ever have to play the melody, right? Because the vocalist is usually taking care of that. But if I'm hired, let's say I'm being hired with a quintet, that is a rhythm section, myself, and a vocalist. Well, you better believe that that vocalist hired me to play solos on every tune. And yeah, there are things like iReal Pro where I could just hit transpose and it would go into another key. But what if I'm playing a gig where I can't have a music stand in front of me? And what if I don't want to be tied to my phone screen? It'd be really nice for me to at least be able to understand the broad strokes of those chord changes in a different key than what I learned it in. And this was really hard for me at first. I mean, if you could have heard the awful, awful, awful solos that I played when I was playing with vocalists who were playing things in foreign keys, you would have laughed at me. And I'm pretty sure there were a lot of gigs there where I didn't get called back for any other gigs because of the way that I played things in those foreign keys, just stepping all over them. But when I started doing this, learning tunes in multiple keys on a regular basis, I started to get used to it. And even if it was like a ridiculously foreign key to me, I could at least feel my way through it because I knew the structure of the tune and I wasn't just memorizing dots and chord changes on a page. Now, the third reason, which is actually very closely related to the second reason, is there are standards that are played in different keys depending on who you're playing with. So like a perfect example would be Autumn Leaves. Depending on who you're playing with, they may play that tune in G minor, or they may play that tune in E minor. And you're not really sure which key they play it in until you're on the bandstand. And there are a handful of tunes in my experience that are like this. There's probably 7 or 8 standards that come to my mind that are played in multiple keys depending on the situation. So even if you're never playing with a vocalist, you're never playing in a big band, you're just playing small combo dates with, quartets, quintets, you're still going to come across situations where out of the blue, whoever the band leader is likes to play that tune in a different key. So you should be ready for that. And what the PDF will be this week for Patreon members is a list of those 7 to 8 tunes that come to my mind that in my experience have been played in different keys depending on who I'm playing with. And that could be a great, great place for you to start in terms of learning a handful of tunes in 2 keys that will actually be practical for you, that will actually pay off for you on gigs and at jam sessions and stuff like that. So make sure you grab that PDF and maybe start with those tunes on the PDF. Make sure you know them in both keys that I've indicated on the sheet. So those are the 3 reasons that I'm presenting you with this material. And I wanted to just make one more statement about learning tunes in multiple keys, but not learning them in all 12 keys. If you go into this and you're very inexperienced, and let's say you're playing a tune like Opera Vav, learning it in all 12 keys is going to be something that you may not even start doing because it's too intimidating. So think about it in only 2 keys to start with. And once you get through that, add one more key or move on. It's really just about the exercise of putting the tune into a different key than it was originally intended. And one of the worst things I see with my students, one of the most disheartening things for me as a teacher, is when a student doesn't start a task because they can't take that first step up the mountain because the mountain looks too big from where they're standing. So you know what? Go and climb a smaller mountain. Okay, if it's too demoralizing for you, learn that tune in one other key. Heck, don't even learn the whole tune. Learn one phrase in one other key, and it will at least get you started down the path to eventually being able to do whatever you want. All right. So if you have any questions on this, or if you want to continue this discussion, feel free to drop a question in the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group, and we can discuss it all you guys want to in there. In fact, I would really enjoy discussing this a little bit further. So if you're not a member, go request to be added over there and ask away, because discussion is really going to be key for a topic like this. Hope you're all doing well out there. Remember, if you want to get that list of tunes plus PDFs to every single other episode, make sure you go and sign up at Patreon, 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners and you get instant access. Stay safe and healthy, everybody, and we'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Bye.